The sky over Valera burned a deep purple, its twin suns glowing faintly above a wasteland of jagged metal and swirling dust. Arasha crouched behind a crumbling steel pillar, her blonde hair tied back, long pointed ears pressed tight against her head. The air stank of scorched earth and something worse, something alive and hunting. Her dull knife trembled in her grip, useless against the monster stalking her. The ground shook with heavy thuds. The obelisk, a hulking mass of flesh fused with machine, loomed closer, its glowing eyes cutting through the haze like lasers. Arasha's breath caught. She squeezed her eyes shut, ready for the end. But instead of claws, a voice roared, "Hey, you oversized scrap heap. Come get me." Her eyes flew open. A man, a human, charged in, his battered armor rattling, dinted helmet glinting under the suns. A plasma spear blazed in his hands, its blue light fierce. He looked like he'd been dragged through a war zone, but his grin was bold. The obelisk turned, and he plunged the spear into its side. Light flared, the beast howled, thrashing before collapsing in a pile of sparking metal and oozing flesh. Silence crashed down. The man stood, wiping blood from his brow, and shot Arasha a lopsided grin. "Hey, you all right? Were you planning to hug that pillar all day?" Arasha blinked, heart still racing, then managed a faint smirk. "You're insane. Call it style," he chuckled, offering a hand. "Come on, let's move." Who is this guy? She thought, taking his hand. Why risk his life for a stranger? The tower groaned, its supports cracking under the weight of the fight. "Hero moment's over," the man said, his grin fading. "Run." The ceiling buckled, showering dust. He pulled her through the rubble, and they sprinted into the desert, boots pounding the cracked ground. Arasha's lungs burned, but she matched his pace, stealing glances at him. Scarred armor, steady eyes, a spark of reckless humor. They laughed, a wild, breathless sound, as if cheating death was a game. What's his story? She wondered. And what's he doing on Valera? They slowed, panting, as the tower's ruins faded behind them. Arasha pulled free, eyeing him warily. "You're trouble." "Name's Ian McCrae," he said, winking. "And you?" "Arasha," she said, brushing dust from her jacket. "I owe you." "Nah, I just like a good fight," he said, glancing back at the dead obelisk, its lights dimming. "That thing, it's not just a beast, is it?" She stiffened, her voice tight. "It's complicated. A mistake my people made." Ian raised an eyebrow. "Mistake? Sounds juicy." "Not now," she snapped, scanning the sky. "A storm's coming. We need cover." He followed her gaze. Black clouds churned, lightning flickering. "Acid rain? Great. Lead the way." They pushed through the desert, Valera's twin suns casting long, eerie shadows. Ian's mind raced. What are these obelisks? He thought. And why she's so cagey about them? The storm's growl grew louder, the air stinging with chemical fumes. Arasha pointed ahead to a crumbling structure, scarred walls, a half-collapsed roof. "There," she said. "Cargo station. It'll hold." They ducked inside, the air heavy with oil and rust. The storm's roar followed, rain sizzling as it hit the ground outside. Ian caught his breath, leaning against a wall. "Nice sprint. You run like you've done this before." Arasha didn't answer, her eyes scanning the shadows. Has she fought these things before? Ian wondered. What's she running from? The station's walls creaked under the storm's assault. Arasha knelt, checking her gear, her face set with determination. Ian watched her, his grin fading. "You're not just out here for fun, are you?" She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "No, I'm here to fix something." "Fix what?" he pressed, stepping closer. "Those obelisks?" Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. What's she hiding? He thought. And why does it feel like she's carrying the whole planet on her shoulders? The storm's howl intensified, shaking the station. Arasha gripped her knife, her voice low. "We're stuck here till it passes. Get comfortable." Ian nodded, settling against a crate. "Guess we got time to figure each other out, then." What's driving her? He thought, watching the storm's flashes light up her face. And what's waiting when we... The acid storm raged outside the cargo station, its howl shaking the rusted walls as rain scorched Valera's barren ground. Inside, Ian McCrae leaned against a crate, his battered armor creaking, while Arasha knelt, rummaging through her pack. The air was thick with oil and rust, but they were safe from the storm's deadly bite, for now. The dim light from a cracked skylight cast shadows across their faces, Valera's twin sons barely visible through the haze. Ian broke the quiet, his voice light. "So, we're not dead yet. What's the plan? Sit here till the suns throw us a party?" Arasha pulled out a small device, her blonde hair catching the faint light. She activated it, and a shimmering energy dome flickered to life, sealing them from the storm's fumes. "We wait it out," she said. "Then we move." Ian whistled. "Nice toy. What's it called?" "Personal Environment Shield," she said, her tone clipped. "Don't die bubble," Ian said, grinning. "Rolls off the tongue." She shook her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You're absurd." "Keeps me sharp," he shot back, stretching. He studied her, sharp eyes, a face that held strength and secrets. What's driving her? He thought. Why's she out here alone? He kicked a rusted bolt across the floor. "All right, spill it. What's a Velmeran like you doing in this wasteland?" "Saving the universe." Arasha's hands paused on her pack. "Not the universe," she said softly. "Just what's left of my home." She met his gaze, her voice heavy with pain. "The Obelisks, those creatures, they were our guardians. Bioweapons we built to protect Valera. Something broke them. They turned on us, destroyed our cities, our people." Her voice wavered. "There's a resonance key in a mountain facility. It can shut them down, if it still exists." Ian's brow furrowed. Did she help create those monsters? He wondered. Is that why she's carrying this guilt? He leaned forward, voice gentle. "That's a hell of a mess. But you're out here, trying to fix it. That takes guts." Her eyes softened, just a fraction. "It's not enough unless I find that key." Ian flashed a crooked smile. "Lucky you ran into me, then. I'm great at finding trouble. Keys can't be much harder." Arasha's smile was small but real. "You're not what I expected, Ian McCrae." "Good," he said, winking. "Keeps things spicy." A spark passed between them, a thread of trust forming. Can she rely on him? She thought. Can he handle what's ahead? The storm's roar softened, the air less bitter. Arasha checked the scanner, then switched off the shield, its hum fading. "The storm's passing. We need to move." Ian stood, grabbing his plasma spear. "Where to, boss?" "A relay station, a few miles out," she said, slinging her pack over her shoulder. "It might have data on the facility's location." "Sounds like a plan," Ian said, his tone playful but his grip firm. "I like trouble, especially with a pretty guide." Arasha rolled her eyes, but her smile lingered. "Don't make me regret this, human." They gathered their gear, the station's walls creaking around them. Ian glanced at Arasha, her face set with determination. "What's she not telling me?" He thought. "What's really at stake here?" As they prepared to leave, a faint hum vibrated through the station's floor. Not the storm, but something alive. Arasha froze, her hand on her knife. "Obelisk," she whispered. "It's close." Ian tightened his grip on the spear, scanning the shadows. "Already? These things don't sleep, do they?" She shook her head, her voice low. "They're drawn to movement. To us. How many of those things are hunting her?" Ian wondered. And why her specifically? They moved to the station's entrance, peering into the desert. The twin suns cast long shadows, and a glint of metal flickered on the horizon. Something massive, watching. Arash's jaw tightened. "We'll have to be fast. The relay station's our next step." Ian nodded, his grin fading. "Ready when you are." They stepped toward the doorway, the hum growing louder. Arasha's scanner beeped, showing a signal nearby. "It's tracking us," she said, her voice tense. "We leave now, or we're trapped." Ian met her gaze, his heart pounding. "What's waiting out there?" He thought. "And can we outrun that thing to find out?" Valera's desert burned under the twin suns, their purple light scorching the dunes. Ian McCrae and Arasha crept from the cargo station, the faint hum of an obelisk fading behind them. Ian gripped his plasma spear, its blue tip glowing faintly, while Arasha held her scanner, her knife ready. The mountains stood distant, a jagged beacon of hope. The air was heavy with dust, carrying a sharp, metallic tang. "Stay sharp," Arasha whispered, eyes scanning the horizon. That obelisk could still be close. Ian nodded, his grin tight. Nothing like a morning jog with a killer robot. They moved quickly, threading through rusted machine husks. The terrain grew treacherous, cracked ground, jagged rocks, and hidden pits veiled by sand. A sudden gust unleashed a bowcat, pelting their faces with grit. Ian squinted, shielding his eyes. "This place is a death trap. Keep moving," Arasha said, her voice calm but firm. "The relay station's close." How many obelisks are out there? Ian thought. And why is that relay station so important? The bowcat thickened, turning the world into a purple blur. A chittering sound pierced the wind, and small, insect-like scavengers, metal shells glinting, erupted from the sand, snapping at their boots. Ian cursed, stabbing one with his spear. "I'm way too old for this." Arasha sliced another with her knife, her movements swift. Scavengers. They sense heat and motion. "Awesome," Ian growled, swatting one away. "We're walking snacks." They cleared the swarm, their breaths heavy. Arasha glanced at her scanner, her face tense. "More could come. We need to move faster. What else is lurking in this desert?" Ian wondered, and how she's so calm about this. The bowcat cleared, revealing Velmeran ruins, crumbled spires, and broken domes scattered like bones. Arasha's gaze lingered, a shadow of pain crossing her face. Ian nudged her. "You all right? You look like you're seeing ghosts." "These were homes," she said softly, "before the obelisks." Ian's voice softened. "Must hit hard, seeing it like this." She nodded, her guard slipping. "It does. But I can't stop now." What's she carrying from that past? Ian thought. And how's it tied to this key? A flicker of movement caught his eye. Not an obelisk, but humans. Arasha yanked him behind a rock. "Survivors," she hissed. "They're dangerous." Ian peeked out. A ragged group, armed with crude weapons, scavenged a wrecked vehicle. Their leader, a scarred man with a plasma pistol, barked orders. "They look like they'd steal my spear and my soul," Ian muttered. "They would," Arasha said. "They live by taking. We can't take them head on." Who are these people? Ian thought. What's turned them into this? "We'll slip past," Arasha said, pointing to a narrow gully. They crept through, but Ian's boot dislodged a rock, clattering loudly. The leader spun, pistol raised. "Who's there?" he shouted. "Great move, hero," Arasha whispered. "Strategic noise," Ian said, grinning. "Keeps them on their toes." They sprinted, the survivors giving chase. Plasma bolts zinged past, scorching the sand. Ian dodged, his old military training kicking in, while Arasha activated a pulse device, its high-pitched wail throwing off the group's aim. They dove into a ditch, hearts racing, as the survivors cursed and retreated, unable to track them. Ian exhaled. That was way too close. Arasha nodded, her expression grim. "Valera breaks everyone, even them." Her words hung heavy. What happened to her people? Ian wondered. What's she not telling me about this place? They climbed out, the relay station now in sight. A crumbling tower, half swallowed by sand, its antenna pulsing faintly. They slipped inside, finding dusty consoles and cracked holograms. Arasha knelt by a terminal, inserting a data chip. This should have coordinates to the mountain facility. Ian stood guard, spear ready. "You're a tech wizard. Where'd you learn this?" "Before everything fell," she said, eyes on the screen. "I was a scientist." "Scientist, huh? Bet you were the cool one," he said, grinning. Her lips twitched. "And you were the troublemaker." "Guilty," he said, winking. Her soft laugh cut through the tension, a spark of warmth in the cold room. Is this more than just teamwork? Ian thought. Or am I reading too much into it? The terminal chimed, projecting a holographic map. Arasha traced a path to a mountain peak. "Got it. The facility's there." Ian leaned closer, their shoulders brushing. "Nice work, Professor." She rolled her eyes, but didn't pull away. "Don't call me that." "Too late," he said, chuckling. The moment held, charged but safe. "Can we keep this up out there?" She thought. "Or will Valera break us too?" A sharp screech shattered the quiet. Not the deep roar of a full obelisk, but something smaller, vicious. Ian spun, spear raised. What now? Arasha's face paled, yanking the chip free. Obelisk, smaller but fast. A sleek, dog-sized obelisk. Metal and flesh fused in a writhing mass. Burst through a window, its glowing eyes locking onto them. Its claws scraped the floor, unnaturally quick. Ian didn't hesitate. Not today, pup. He thrust his spear, the plasma tip piercing its core. Blue light flared, and the creature shrieked, a high-pitched wail that echoed across the desert. It collapsed, twitching, then went still. Ian exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. Piece of cake. Arasha grabbed his arm, her voice urgent. That scream, it's a signal. A deep, bone-rattling roar answered from the distance, followed by another, then a third. The ground trembled as massive shapes loomed on the horizon. Obelisks, full-grown, their glowing eyes cutting through the dust. Arasha's scanner blared, showing multiple signals converging. Great, Ian muttered. I poke one, and the whole family shows up. We can't fight them, Arasha said, stuffing the chip into her pack. To the mountains now. They bolted from the station, sand kicking up behind them. The obelisk's roars grew louder, their claws tearing through the dunes. Arasha pointed to the mountains, their peaks sharp against the purple sky. That's our only shot. Ian nodded, his heart pounding. What's in that facility? He thought, as the ground shook beneath them. And can we reach it before those things tear us apart? Valera's mountains loomed like jagged teeth against the purple sky, their peaks shrouded in swirling snow. Ian McCrae and Arasha scrambled up the rocky slopes, the roars of obelisks shaking the ground below. Ian's plasma spear glowed faintly, his breath visible in the freezing air, while Arasha clutched the data chip, her scanner blinking wildly. The wind howled, carrying shards of ice that stung their faces. The group of obelisks, massive, their glowing eyes piercing the storm, lumbered closer, their claws tearing into the cliffs. Keep climbing, Arasha shouted, dodging a falling rock. The facility's up there. Ian grinned through gritted teeth. Climbing with monsters on my tail? Worst vacation ever. How many of those giants are after us? He thought. And what's in that facility she's so desperate to reach? The storm worsened, a blizzard of ice and wind slowing their ascent. The path narrowed, forcing them to hug the cliff face. A deep roar echoed, and a boulder crashed nearby, kicked loose by an obelisk claw. Ian glanced down, seeing their glowing eyes through the snow. They're not giving up. Arasha's voice was steady. Neither are we. There's a cave ahead, cover. They ducked into a small hang bang, its walls glinting with frost. The space was tight, forcing them to sit close, their breaths mingling in the cold. Ian rubbed his hands, shivering. I'm not used to sitting this close to someone as pretty as you. Arasha's lips twitched, her cheeks flushed from the cold. Save the charm, human. We're not safe yet. Worth a shot, he said, winking. Her soft laugh warmed the icy air, a fleeting moment of connection. Is she starting to trust me? He thought. Or is this just the cold talking? The obelisk's roars grew distant, muffled by the storm. Arasha checked her scanner, her face tense. They're circling below. We need to move before they find the cave. Ian nodded, his grin fading. Lead the way, Professor. She shot him a look, but didn't protest. What's she risking for this key? He wondered. And what happens if we actually find it? They emerged from the cave, the blizzard still raging. The path steepened, slick with ice. Arasha slipped, and Ian caught her arm, steadying her. Got you, he said, their eyes locking briefly. Thanks, she murmured, pulling free but lingering close. The moment held, charged but safe. They pressed on, the facility's silhouette now visible, a massive structure carved into the mountain, its metal doors glinting through the snow. They reached the entrance, a heavy gate scarred by time. Arasha hacked the control panel, sparks flying as it groaned open. Inside, the facility hummed with dormant power, sleek corridors lined with glowing panels, air thick with the hum of machinery. "This is it," Arasha said, her voice low. "The resonance key's here. What kind of tech is this?" Ian thought. "And why does it feel like we're walking into a trap?" The corridors twisted, lined with automated turrets that whirred to life. Ian dove, pulling Arasha behind a wall as plasma bolts scorched the floor. "I'm not great at math, but I'm awesome at running," he shouted, dodging another volley. Arasha tossed a pulse grenade, shorting out the turrets. "Stay behind me," she said, leading them through. Her knowledge of the systems was uncanny, her fingers dancing over control panels to disable traps, laser grids, collapsing floors. Ian watched, impressed. "You're like a sci-fi ninja." "Focus," she said, but her smile betrayed her. How does she know this place so well? He wondered. Was she part of this? They reached a central chamber, a vast dome with a glowing pedestal at its heart. A small, crystalline device, the resonance key, pulsed on it, surrounded by holographic readouts. Arasha approached, her hands trembling. "This is it. It can shut down the obelisks." Ian kept watch, spear ready. "Then let's do it and get out. This place gives me the creeps." She inserted the data chip, and the pedestal hummed, projecting a signal grid. Arasha's fingers flew, activating the key. A low pulse reverberated through the facility, and her scanner beeped, showing obelisk signals fading across Valera. "It's working," she whispered, relief in her voice. But the chamber shook violently. Alarms blared, and cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. "The system's overloading," Arasha shouted. "The facility's collapsing." Ian grabbed her arm. "Time to go." They sprinted through the corridors, dodging falling debris. Turrets sparked, firing wildly as the power surged. A massive beam crashed down, blocking their path. Ian thrust his spear, blasting through, while Arasha used her scanner to navigate. "This way," she yelled. The entrance was in sight, but the ground buckled, throwing them forward. They stumbled out into the snow, the facility imploding behind them in a cloud of dust and sparks. Ian pulled Arasha close, shielding her as rubble rained down. The storm had cleared, Valera's twin suns casting an eerie glow over the wreckage. They stood, panting, staring at the ruins. Arasha checked her scanner, her face a mix of exhaustion and hope. The signal went out. "The obelisks are down." Ian grinned, brushing dust from his armor. "We did it. Not bad for a troublemaker and a professor." She smiled, her guard down for the first time. "Not bad at all. What happens to Valera now?" Ian thought, looking at the quiet mountains. "And what does this mean for us?" Valera's twin suns hung low, casting a purple glow over the shattered mountains. Ian McCrae and Arasha staggered through the desert, their armor battered, faces streaked with dust and sweat. The air was still, the silence deafening after the obelisk's roars faded. Arasha's scanner glowed faintly, confirming the resonance key's signal had swept across the planet, silencing the bioweapons. They'd done it. Valera was free. But the cost weighed heavy as they trudged toward the old cargo station, their only refuge. Ian broke the quiet, his voice hoarse. "We just saved a planet, Professor. Feel like a hero yet?" Arasha's lips curved, exhaustion in her eyes. "Not yet. Not until I know it's real." "Do we really stop them all?" Ian thought, glancing at her. "And what's next for her now?" They reached the cargo station, its rusted walls a familiar sight. Inside, Arasha activated a dusty console, her fingers trembling as she tuned into survivor frequencies. Static crackled, then voices erupted, dozens, hundreds from hidden bunkers and ruined cities across Valera. "The obelisks are down," a woman shouted. "They're dead." Cheers followed, raw and triumphant, echoing through the speakers. Arasha's breath caught, tears welling as she gripped the console. Ian rested a hand on her shoulder. "You did it, Arasha. You saved your home." She shook her head, voice breaking. "We did it. I couldn't have reached the key without you." "What does this mean for Valera?" Ian wondered, watching her. "And for us?" The console beeped, displaying a new signal, a powerful distress beacon, broadcast to neighboring systems. "This is Valera, A survivor's voice declared. We're alive. We need help to rebuild. Please answer us. The message looped, a desperate plea and a defiant cry of survival. Arasha's eyes lit with hope. They'll hear us. The galaxy will come. Ian grinned. You're going to have a whole fleet landing here soon. Better clean the place up. She laughed, a sound of pure relief. You're impossible. Part of my charm, he said, winking. Their eyes locked, a spark of something deeper passing between them. Is she thinking about staying? He thought. Or is this goodbye? They stepped outside, the desert now alive with movement. From distant dunes, survivors emerged. Families, fighters, elders, carrying salvaged tech and weapons, their faces alight with hope. A group approached, led by a grizzled woman who'd once been among the hostile scavengers. You stopped them, she said, voice thick. We saw the signal. We're ready to rebuild, together. Arasha nodded, her resolve returning. Valera's ours again. We start now. The crowd cheered, a roar that shook the sands. Ian watched, awed by the scale of it. Arasha, a lone scientist, had sparked a planet's rebirth. What kind of future is she building? He thought. And where do I fit in? They sat on a crate, the sun's setting behind them. Ian's voice softened. You've got a whole planet to fix. Big job for a professor. Arasha leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his. And you? Back to Earth? Or sticking around? He met her gaze, his grin softening. Everyone's got a past. It's the future that counts. And I think mine's looking pretty good right here. She smiled, her hand finding his fingers intertwining. Ian's heart raced. He gently pulled her closer, her eyes widening but warm. Arasha, he murmured, voice low. I'm not good with words, but... He leaned in, and their lips met, a soft, urgent kiss, their breaths quick and warm in the cool desert air. The world, Valera, the survivors, the stars, faded for a moment, leaving only them, bound by their shared victory. They parted, breathless, her smile radiant. Good answer, troublemaker, she whispered.